Hey guys, the Wheelspin Report here, coming back at you with another video. I hope you enjoyed the last video. But before we begin, ensure you like and subscribe as it helps the channel. With that being said, let's get into today's video. NASCAR safety was, and still is, a central talking point surrounding the new Generation 7 car. The rear crash structure of the next gen proved to be incompetent when faced with rear impacts, even with the slightest of hits. This safety issue brought NASCAR into the headlines as drivers such as Alex Bowman, Denny Hamlin, Kurt Busch, and others were sidelined due to injuries related to these impacts. But what if I told you something of the sort has already happened in NASCAR history? In the 1990s and early 2000s, the safety-first mindset was not always NASCAR's top priority like it is today. Some terrible crashes would occur, often resulting in injuries with little remedy for the driver's safety. We know now that the Gen 7 safety issues are already well under the microscope of NASCAR, but back then, such safety irregularities would go unnoticed. That being said, let us dive back to the time of NASCAR's early beginnings. Back in the mid-20th century, when NASCAR was conceived by none other than Bill France Sr., he always envisioned getting his newly created racing league off of the sandy beaches of Daytona Beach, Florida, and onto a purpose-built speedway of his own. And that he did in 1957 with the groundbreaking of the Daytona International Speedway. The track would feature a massive 2.5-mile oval complete with 31-degree banking in the corners. With this, cars could achieve speeds that nobody on the planet had ever seen. As he was known, Big Bill would build an equally large and fast track in the heart of Dixieland in Talladega, Alabama in 1969. Over the years, these tracks would be home to NASCAR's fastest speeds, even Bill Elliott reaching a blistering 212 mph lap at Talladega in 1987. With these breakneck speeds, an accident of biblical proportions was bound to happen. It came at the same racing weekend as Elliott's rocket ship lap, with Bobby Allison flipping and crashing at nearly 205 mph at the start-finish line at Talladega. This led NASCAR to implement a restrictor plate, a device installed to limit the amount of airflow to the engine in its intake, thus reducing horsepower by limiting engine combustion. And so NASCAR zoomed through the 1990s with these restrictor plates at superspeedways. However, the style of racing changed. The cars became packed together neatly at slightly lower speeds, giving way to what we know now as pack racing and the massive superspeedway wrecks of the big one. Driver safety, however, was little to speak of. In the 1990s and onward, drivers would often wear open-faced helmets and sit in shoddy racing seats with little protection. Concrete barriers would do little to withstand the force of a near 200 mph impact, and the unreinforced fencing sitting above it barely did its job keeping debris from entering the grandstands. There was also no neck support whatsoever, so the chance of a driver suffering from whiplash and even death would occur in the event of a crash. NASCAR would lose 2 drivers on one weekend in 1994 at Daytona, a track that had sometimes become synonymous with driver injuries and death. NASCAR would go about fiddling with safety by inaction, hoping to avoid future reprisals by mere chance. Their next test with safety would come on February 18th, 2000.
We're all excited. In fact, Greg Biffle said it best, BP. It is the Super Bowl at Daytona. Everybody is just raring to go. In fact, they took a class photo similar to what Winston Cup did first time at the Brickyard.
Marty, there must be 10,000 race car drivers all around this country running on Friday night and Saturday night, all dreaming of coming to Daytona and run Daytona International Speedway. And today, 36 trucks get that chance to run. And Ray Evernham, NASCAR realized that they had some inexperienced drivers and some unknowns with the trucks. They had to make these trucks as easy to drive as possible.
NASCAR would arrive for its season opener at Daytona for the Craftsman Truck Series race. It would feature a star-studded lineup of Kurt Busch, Mike Wallace, Truck Series veterans Andy Houston and Terry Cook, with Greg Biffle, Morgan Shepherd, Jamie McMurray, and Geoff Bodine, among many others. Attendance numbers vary, but are judged by the crowd size, roughly 30 or 40,000 people were in attendance. The Truck Series then differed from their Cup and Busch Series counterparts. Besides being pickup trucks, NASCAR deemed that the horsepower their engines produced was too weak to need restrictor plates. Also, Daytona looked a lot different back then. Aside from having far less seating than today, it would have a much different racing surface than today. It featured undulating bumps in its texture, requiring drivers to give much more wheel inputs compared to hold it and stick of the silky surface it is today. The race would start like any other truck race. A brief green flag run was interrupted by a wreck during a commercial break, featuring an incredible save by Geoff Bodine while trucks piled in behind him. Bodine would be relegated to the field's tail end, hoping to make it to the front with his fast Ford F-150. The race would continue as usual, only to be interrupted again by an errant spinning truck off of Turn 4. Another caution would soon follow in the tri-oval when Randy Renfro and others were spun, resulting in a near flip that took out even more trucks. It seemed now that wrecks and survival would be the theme of the day, only a matter of when and where the next one would be. Another caution would follow again for another spinning truck, but luckily nobody else was involved. The race got back underway with cameras centering on Geoff Bodine's truck as it seemed he was recovering rather well from his earlier spin. The seemingly single-file pack screamed around the track to begin lap 57, the TV also focusing on Geoff Bodine's onboard view. With 43 laps to go, drivers began dueling to try and make their way to the front. Coming off of Turn 4 on lap 57, trucks screaming at max RPMs going some 185 miles per hour, drivers began making their moves. Geoff Bodine on the outside, Kurt Busch and Rob Morgan beside him. The trucks came staggering into the tri-oval, and Morgan made a daring dive down in front of Kurt Busch, but he wasn't clear.
Don't know what's going on there.
Whoa! Oh, look out! We got trouble. This is going to hurt.
Uh-oh.
Oh, my. Oh, my.
Yep.
Keep your fingers crossed.
Morgan's car turned out onto a truck on the inside and shot back up towards the outside wall. Lying in the way of the concrete wall was Geoff Bodine, with no time to react except brace for the worst. Morgan's right front fender and tire hit Bodine's left front at a perfect angle, like two spinning tops hitting each other. The sudden impact catapulted the front of Bodine's car, causing it to get airborne, setting his truck over the concrete barrier and into the catch fence. Upon impact with the catch fence, Bodine's car was vaporized. The fuel cell and whatever fuel was in the engine immediately ignited and exploded, showering spectators and the track in a massive ball of sparks and fire, tearing a nearly 30-foot gash in the catch fence. From there, the car's inner shell and roll cage tumbled back onto the track, being hit by more trucks with nowhere to go. The secondary impacts ignited further oil and fuel fires, creating a second but smaller fireball. By then, the engine had separated from the car and began tumbling into the grass and flames, the announcers in total disbelief as to what had just happened. Finally, the roll cage and front suspension, with only 2 tires attached, came to rest just outside the tri-oval on the track with Geoff Bodine miraculously still in the vehicle. Announcers, fans, and crew members alike immediately feared the worst. They had witnessed the horrific death of Geoff Bodine. The next task became to get him out, and what they believed at the time was whatever was left of him, into a hospital immediately. From there, a silence fell upon the racetrack. The only sounds that could be heard were the gushing of the fire extinguishers, the track PA system, and the engines of the emergency vehicles. Silence on a racetrack is an eerie scene. It is the same sound in a football game or other sports arenas when a devastating injury occurs. Only at motor races does the spectacle of silence of no engines and a crowd of tens of thousands at a giant racetrack overwhelm the hearts of all. Bodine's body was pulled from the car and promptly rushed to the infield care center. Only some 5 minutes later did the news come out of his emerging condition.
Let's get an update on Jeffrey. What's the latest?
Well, Marty, right behind me, Glenn Johnson is just giving the information to the media here. He's the Director of Communications here at Daytona, and he tells us that Jeffrey was transported directly to Halifax Hospital, that he is semi-conscious, and that he is moving. He also mentioned that he has not said anything at this point, but that he is semi-conscious. So, first update on Jeffrey Bodine is very good news.
I'll tell you what, guys. Looking at the number of rolls, my heart was stopping, and that is good news.
After that day, NASCAR flirted with death and danger. They had passed their safety test and went on like nothing had happened, giving them a false sense of reality that their cars could withstand anything. It was only a matter of time until their reckoning, which would come exactly 1 year later on February 18th, 2001.
For this moment, to start the Daytona 500. Hi everyone, Mike Joy with the 1989 winner of this race, Darrell Waltrip, after 17 years of trying. And Larry McReynolds has been to victory lane in the 500 twice as a crew chief. Gentlemen, what does it mean to win the single biggest race in NASCAR?
Well, as a little boy, I heard about Daytona. And as a young race driver, I dreamed about racing at Daytona. And then I dreamed about winning at Daytona. It took a long time. Some dreams turn into nightmares, like some of these guys have had happen to them. But there's no greater feeling, no greater accomplishment than driving your car through those pearly gates into that holy ground.